Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
Lots of stuff to talk about this morning. John, in the last break, talked about the TikTok thing. There is a TikTok influencer, and once again, influencer, who has over 500,000 fans. You have 500,000 followers on TikTok, okay? And a couple interesting aspects of him. First off, he's a self-admitted illegal immigrant in the United States. I think he's from Nicaragua or Honduras or something like that.
Nice. That's inspiration. He's a newcomer, Brad. Come on.
He's a newcomer. And his latest, he's doing a whole series of TikToks on how great America is because you can come here, you can go across the border, and then you can pick out a house and you can squat in it for free.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. It's the American dream.
Right. And he's bragging about the fact that apparently he's squatting in an apartment somewhere, don't know exactly where it's at. And he's talking about how the laws in America are so great because they protect the people who are living in apartments and houses and not the owners.
Oh, that is true, right, Brad? That's what good old Benny Franklin had in mind.
You know, this, if you know what we're talking about with this thing's becoming more and more prevalent where the laws in a lot of communities are obviously essentially biased toward the tenant. In other words, if you're renting a home, you're renting an apartment, and you don't pay your rent, or you're causing a disturbance, or whatever the deal is, and the tenant, or excuse me, the landlord, under the terms of the agreement, essentially says, you know what, you violated the lease. I'm going to file eviction. So then it has to go through the courts. They can leave voluntarily. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Then if they don't leave voluntarily, they have to get the courts involved, which can take several months. And then ultimately the sheriff has to show up and essentially, take them out, put their furniture on the front lawn, that kind of stuff. The problem with that is that there are people that take advantage of that. And the situation that's happened is that people are essentially forging lease documents where they claim, well, I got a lease document from the owner. And I read something over the weekend, which I never even thought about. There are people that are scamming people. They say in some cities this is becoming quite prevalent. They're putting leases up on Craigslist or on Marketplace and essentially, hey, look at this house. You can rent this house. It's not their house. And what they do
absolutely.
is
yeah, that does happen, Brad. A lot of the things you'll see on like a Craigslist for real estate are completely fake.
Right. And they people show up, they give a deposit, and then when they try to move in, they realize that's not the people that they did the dealing with is not the person who actually owns the house. Okay. So this guy is on there on TikTok and he's saying, okay, here's how, essentially what he's doing is here's how to break the law. Okay. Once again, do we need that on TikTok? No, but that could be very easily on Facebook. Could be on Facebook Reels. It could be on YouTube Shorts. It could be anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it would take a while for the technology companies to, after it's reported, to find it, to take it down, to give the person a first warning, all that stuff. That takes time.
Do you know what drives me nuts on a lot of these sites? And they talk about, and to the point where it's like, okay, it's so obvious that if you pay the money, the technology companies aren't going to boot you if you do something wrong. Have you ever seen these stupid little pictures where it shows like the back of some kind of a piece of equipment, and it shows like you stick a Q-tip in, and this will give you free cable TV. You ever seen those stupid ones before?
That are like the preview for YouTube Shorts?
No. They're ads like on Facebook all the time. It shows.
Oh no, I don't use Facebook, so I haven't seen those.
It showed you like a picture of like, let's say it's like a your cable box, okay? Like if you still have cable, it's your cable box, and they show you like if you put a piece of wire in this outlet right there.
So it's one of those click farming things where if you click on it, it just click. Is it just clickbait? Like it doesn't actually give you that tip?
Yeah,
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
and it's to the point where it's like, okay, guys, you're selling those ads. You talk about, you're pulling people's posts off. Pull your own stupid ads, which are misleading off. You know what I mean?
I get it. Yeah, the one that I see on all the time on like newspaper sites is it'll show like some orange like globular substance and say doctors say do this one simple tip to remove this from your arteries. And then you click on it, it has nothing to do with that.
Or like, for example, there's one I see all the time that shows that like they said, here's why when you park your car, you should put a bottle of water above your tire on your driver's side. And you go like,
I haven't seen this.
Oh, it's like what in the world is that?
And then what is like? Is that really a thing? Or I mean, obviously, when you click on the story, you don't get taken there.
It's just.
But is that actually a thing or not?
No, it's BS.
Yeah.
But see, the thing about it is that they're paying. In other words, the idea being is they're paying those social media sites to put that ad there. And remember, once again, you already have, like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example, okay? When I post, we post our show, I chop the show up and I put it up on our it goes, the whole show overview goes on a post on the bjshow.co website, okay?
Yep.
And included in that site are links to our podcasts. We do 3 segments of the show. There's 3 different podcasts, okay? And also, I upload the shows to YouTube. Like, for example, if I put in the comment section and I do a brief little thing like segment A, John talked about the top 3. Segment B, we talked about TikTok. Segment 3, we talked about black. Okay, if I put anything to do with certain topics, like, for example, it happened twice so far in the last couple of weeks. If I put, we discuss abortion in Missouri, then when that goes up on YouTube, they put a disclaimer on it. And they put a disclaimer on it that says, and it gives you like the definition of abortion is blah, 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 blah. I'm going, okay, what is this? I mean, once again, we're not saying go out and get an abortion. We're not saying don't go out and get an abortion. We're discussing the abortion issue as it pertains to politics and what's specifically what's going on in the state of Missouri, which a lot of people won't really necessarily fess up to, is the Republicans are trying to get this thing with the initiative, the IP, what's it called? Initiative
petition.
Initiative petition, where essentially it'll make it so much harder for people to amend the Constitution. We already had it amended once with the marijuana thing, and they're trying to do the same thing with the abortion. Right now, it's like a fight to the finish line because of the fact that the Republicans primarily are trying to get the initiative petition changed, so it'll be much tougher for people to modify the Constitution by doing the whole thing with the signatures, and then it becomes on
right. And so let's get back to so go ahead and finish your point about the technology companies. So what you're saying is that technology companies, if they see a word, they have a system flagged whereby if you talk about a pertinent controversial issue, the companies add a disclaimer, which is what happened for a while on Twitter and others saying, okay, here's the definition of this. I mean, most of these technology companies are flagging political content now automatically. Like their algorithm will either segregate it. And you've probably seen this over the weekend, Brad. One of the things that elected officials and political people were copying and pasting from each other without giving anybody proper credit was the Instagram default now. I know that you're not an Instagram guy, but if folks go to Instagram, you can go to settings and you go down to what you see. Instagram/Meta has made the default setting that your content that you see that is political will be limited from people that you don't follow. So in other words, when reels are suggested to you, when reels are suggested to you in your feed, if it's political, you're not going to see it. So the memes that people were stealing from each other and passing around as if they were their own this weekend were saying, hey, here's where you go into the settings and you can move the dial over if you want to keep seeing political content.
No, the point I was making, and I didn't do a very good job of making it, was the point I'm making is you pay the companies, they'll run practically anything. If you don't pay them, they'll put you in Facebook jail or whatever.
In purgatory.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Well, a lot of radio companies though, excuse me, I've seen I know, for example, Wake Up Mid-Missouri, Stephanie Bell's show in Columbia, if they have a little bit of music in the bumper, like coming in, and Hannah doesn't cut it out or it's not cut out immediately, you'll get, if you go to their YouTube page, you'll get a thing that says, this audio has been removed based on claims from Sony Music Group. And then the entire show is gone. And I'm sure it takes a lot to go in and then chop out that, I'm sure there's steps that the station can take. But yeah, I mean, I think they're ruthless about it.
Why do you think we don't run any music like that when I do the bumps?
I know. I mean, it's enough that we have to pay Mary Elizabeth Coleman royalties to use her voice. By the way, Brad, to combine your squatter story with initiative petitions, on Friday, Mark Reardon had Jane Duker, State Representative Steve Butts, who is one of those very rare unicorns, Brad. He is a white male Democrat in St. Louis City. I mean, talk about people that should be protected by law. We should put him in a glass cage because there's very few of him left. And Mary Elizabeth Coleman were on Reardon's show, and they were talking about the squatters. Steve Butts was talking, the unfortunately named Steve Butts was talking about the squatters that are at the corner of Spring and Chippewa. And I think you've seen this in the Post-Dispatch, and we've even discussed this on the show before.
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Thank you, MEC.
Okay.
You're always here in spirit.
Okay, what we've talked about this before. If you don't know this story, this has gone on for like 3 years, hasn't it? 3 years now?
Yeah, at least 2, but probably 3.
And it's in South City, and I think it's 2 squatters. And once again, here's the crazy thing where they're camped out in front of someone's house, but because of the way the lots and things like that are designated in the city of St. Louis, they are, as I understand it, they're between the sidewalk and the street. Isn't that where they're at?
They're on that hell strip between the sidewalk and the road that's usually like really crummy grass and some poorly maintained trees. Yeah.
Right. So technically, they're not on the person's property. And we talked about this before, that almost everybody in the St. Louis area, if you own a house, if you pull out your survey when you bought the house, it'll show the easements, and you may have more than one. Typically, almost everybody has easements in the front of their property for like utilities, electric, cable, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times there will be easements in the rear as well too. Sometimes people don't even realize this. Sometimes you may have an easement on all sides of your property for various reasons. So essentially, it's a loophole in the law where they have set up a homeless encampment on an area that is sort of like no man's land, to the point where it's technically part of the people's property, but it's not because it's easement, and technically it's part of the city's property, but it's not. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere, and they've been there for like 3 years.
Yeah, and credit to Steve Butts, because on Reardon's show he called the whole thing ridiculous. And I mean, again, to hear a Democrat speak so plainly and clearly about such a common sense issue is refreshing. Again, he is a white male Democrat in St. Louis City, so you're going to expect, some bit of common sense coming from him. But to hear him call it ridiculous is pretty bold for a Democrat.
Well, here's the problem you run into, okay? If you look at this big picture, if this would happen, and let's just throw out some names: Creve Coeur, Ladue, Chesterfield, Wildwood, Kirkwood, Webster Groves. If this would happen in any of those cities, it would be taken care of relatively quickly, okay?
And quietly and immediately.
Right. It would not last long, okay? But unfortunately, you have certain areas, like for the city, where people just sort of turn a blind eye to this kind of stuff. I mean, when I say not the residents hate it. It's the government just, we're not going to pay attention to that, because of the fact that there's political ramifications, there's ideology ramifications. It's like the whole squatter thing. The crazy thing about this is that in some areas of the country, like for example in New York, where they have rent protection, I think to a certain extent, I think they have that in certain parts of California as well too. Essentially, if you own an apartment building And in New York City, you can't raise the rent. So in other words, even if your insurance goes up, in other words, you're the landlord, you have the building, you have insurance on the building, and even though everything about the building gets more expensive, you can't raise your rates because the building is in rent protection, okay? So, and they've made it so incredibly hard because once upon a time, a landlord forcibly evicts someone from their home and he did something wrong, and so they're going to pass a law against it. Because what happens if you this is now the procedure that happens with legislation, okay? Something happens. Let's say you're walking down the street and a toad jumps out of a sewer and lands on your foot, and you jump up and down to get that toad off your foot, and you fall into the street and whack your head. There's going to be some legislator sitting at home going like, oh my God, I can't believe that poor person had that toad jump on their foot, and they jumped around, and I'm going to pass a law that you can't have toads in your sewers.
That's right. That's where the phrase "there ought to be a law" comes from.
Right.
There ought to be a law against jumping toads.
Right. And I'm obviously that's a ridiculous thing, but once again. Okay. Moving on. I have an answer to the question I posed to you, which you didn't have the answer to. Now I have the answer. What happened to Jamie Allman?
Oh, yeah. Do you know?
I do know. Jamie Allman is no longer in The Patriot. And if you know the history of Jamie Allman was a Channel 4 reporter for a long time, made the move to radio, did a successful show on 97.1, was actually doing a nightly half-hour sort of political show on Channel 30. And then Jamie posted a post on Twitter about one of the guys, was it David Hogg? David Hogg, one of the Parkland survivors of the Parkland High School shooting. A not very nice tweet, and Jamie got fired from 97.1. He got fired from Channel 30. And then he did his own little show online, and then he ultimately was supposed to be one of the original people to be on the air with Tracy's new station. That didn't materialize. He ends up going to the Patriot with iHeart when they turned what used to be the old Magic 104.9, a music station, into a talk station, and he was the morning guy there. Well, I went and found his Facebook page, and he explains that apparently it's a monetary situation where he has been, and here's what I don't quite understand. He says he's been let go from 104.9, but, and I didn't realize this, he's still doing his show for the iHeart stations, I think he said in San Diego and Arizona and Phoenix.
Oh, nice. Well, that's good.
Well, but he's then kept alluding to the fact, well, I'm going to be back on the radio soon. And I'm going like, okay, where's he going to end up at? And the sad part of this is what they've replaced Jamie Allman with, a local guy, talked about local things in the St. Louis area, is now a guy, and once again, I heard the guy briefly last week. Sounds like he's a pretty good guy. Not going to, say, well, he sucks, but he's not a local guy. He's out of Nashville, and he's at another iHeart station, and this is what iHeart does. And if you now tune into 104.9, and I'm not, this is not me dissing the station because I'm a proponent of radio. I'm saying you should listen to 104.9. You should listen to Tracy's station. Listen to, the refugee station. That's the J3 as we call them, News Talk STL. Listen to those stations because I'm a pro radio guy. The problem is that now 104.9 has no local programming whatsoever.
Yeah, so it would just be like going to your podcast app and listening to random national shows.
Well, essentially that's because after Jamie comes on in the morning, or I think they even changed the timing. I think what happens now is I think that if I'm not mistaken, I think that it now is this morning guy out of Nashville is on from 5 to 8, and I think they put in another hour of Glenn Beck. So Glenn Beck runs from 8 to 11, and then they have Clay Travis and Buck, whatever his name is, Buck Sexton on from 11 to 2, and then it's Sean Hannity from 2 to 5, and then they used to have on Jesse Kelly from 5 till 8, but then Del Walmsley bought 2 hours, so they now run Jesse Kelly.
Oh, yeah, good. Well, see, that's some Missouri broadcasting there, Brad, at least.
Well, he's not a Missouri guy.
I mean, technically. Hey, listen, as it relates to Jamie was always good to me. I always had a good relationship with Jamie. Jamie had when he was first at 97.1, he had what he called the hot stove, and he just had a bunch of links, and Jamie had a link to me up from day one. I'm always grateful for that. Well, he's always good in my book.
My thing, I'm lamenting about the fact that, once again, this is sad what's happening to our industry. And
yeah, you're right.
Look, I'm not going to beat the drum on this because I'm a little bit concerned about this, that 97.1 along with KZK and Y98 and KMOX are all involved in this bankruptcy with Odyssey, okay? And I got a feeling that when the dust settles and they come out of bankruptcy, there's going to be a lot of changes at those stations. I really do.
I imagine. And you know what? They're probably going to go the 104.9 model and just bring everything in, and you don't have to worry about paying people and screw local advertisers, right? Because whatever.
We like local advertisers.
That's right, we do.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?